It is Wednesday, August 5th, 2026. Why does this sound off? And we left off on Genesis 6, verse 1. So we pick it up right there. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. Wait, so a few questions. So it kind of skips, just kind of thrashes across a very big thing here, which is the sons of God. The sons of God. Which I guess would be the Nephilim. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. When the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them, these were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Okay, what is this? This is fascinating. So I never knew it went into so much detail in Genesis, but so let me see how far this goes and then we'll grab the whole blob. Okay, let's start over. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. So I don't know if that's a reaction to what was happening, or if that's just like a totally separate statement. Probably related, because then it says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, meaning after the flood, I assume, although we haven't gotten there yet. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. When the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them, these were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Okay, so I think that's a good enough chunk there. Two questions about this passage. Did God shorten man's lifespan because of what the Nephilim had done? And are the sons of God the Nephilim? And also, is this saying that Nephilim still are on the earth, since it says that they were on the earth in that day and after, referring to the flood? I suppose that's three questions, but still. Here's a breakdown of your questions based on the text of Genesis 6, 1 through 4, and its grammatical and context clues. So did God shorten man's lifespan because of what the Nephilim had done? No, not directly because of the Nephilim. In verse 3, God's decree, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. It's an odd placement, though. It's just like right in the middle of talking about the Nephilim. My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years, is aimed specifically at mankind, not the Nephilim, right? Because the text links God's judgment to human mortality and boundary crossing. The improper unions between the sons of God and human women led to widespread human corruption. Okay. Role of the Nephilim. The Nephilim are described in verse 4 as the result or the product of these unions. Oh, okay. So not the Nephilim were not the sons of God, but the byproduct of the sons of God having children with human women. Which is also interesting because why? Okay, so there's no. Oh, well, duh, it says sons of God, implying male. But also then, does that mean that, so sons of God as in, I assume angels, so angels procreate? Like they have genders? So many questions. Okay, rather than the originators who brought about God's judgment. Note, scholars debate 120 years refers to a shortened maximum human lifespan or a 120-year countdown grace period until the Great Flood occurs. Oh, I see. Also would be interesting is I wonder if anyone has lived longer than 120 since this declaration. Are the sons of God the Nephilim? No, they are distinct entities in the narrative, so they are not. The sons of God, B'nai Ha-Elohim, the fathers, major interpretations view them as heavenly angelic beings, rulers, or the godly line of Seth. The Nephilim, the offspring produced when the sons of God came into the daughters of man. My head is bursting right now. Okay. Does in those days and afterward mean Nephilim are still on the earth today or after the flood? No, it does not mean they are on the earth today. The phrase in those days and also afterward addresses the scope of ancient history relative to the narrator. In those days refers to the antediluvian pre-flood era when human population multiplied and these unions began, and also afterward refers to the subsequent period leading up to the flood or to the appearance of giant-like groups after the flood mentioned later in Scripture. Okay. We're about to read all this for ourselves, but I'm just curious what. Okay, according to the Genesis narrative, all living creatures outside the ark perished in the flood. Any post-flood references to Nephilim, like the spies report in Numbers 13, describe ancient groups encountered during the Exodus and conquest eras, groups that were ultimately defeated during Israel's conquest of Canaan. Okay, we haven't gotten that far, so I have no idea what that's referring to. So if the sons of God refers to angelic beings, doesn't that imply that angels have genders and also that they procreate? Is there ever any other mention of a female angel or gender of any kind in reference to angels? Yes, if you interpret the sons of God as angelic beings, it does raise natural questions about gender and procreation. So does the angelic view imply angels have gender and can procreate? If one holds the view that the sons of God were angelic beings, often called the angel theory or watcher theory, the implication is that they either possessed or assumed physical male functioning bodies capable of mating with human women. Which would be strange because, not strange, I mean, the whole thing is supernatural to begin with, but I don't know. I mean, like, why? Never mind. I'm not even going to say it. However, theology addresses this dynamic in a few key ways. Unnatural transgression, ancient Jewish tradition, such as the non-canonical Book of Enoch, and the New Testament epistles like Jude and Peter, 2 Peter, frame this event not as a normal angelic ability, but as a severe, unnatural violation of the order God established. In other words, they were not supposed to do this. It was a rebellion where fallen spiritual beings left their designated domain. Okay. Inherent nature versus physical manifestation. Spiritually, angels are non-corporeal, meaning spirit beings. But throughout the Old Testament, when angels appear on earth, they frequently manifest in tangible, physical human bodies, eating food, being touched, and appearing as men. What did Jesus say about angels and procreation? Jesus addresses the normal state of angels in the Gospels when asked about marriage and the resurrection. Jesus says, "For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven." Okay, so implying that by default angels do not marry. They do not marry. And perhaps even don't have a gender, but maybe it's not explicitly stated. Jesus states that in their standard heavenly state, angels do not marry or reproduce. Proponents of the angelic view in Genesis 6 argue that Jesus specifically refers to the angels in heaven who obey God's orders, whereas Genesis 6 describes rebellious fallen angels who explicitly abandoned that order. Are female angels ever mentioned in the Bible? No, that's pretty straightforward. Why many theologians prefer the alternative view? Because the idea of angels procreating creates major theological and biological difficulties, many biblical scholars and traditional commentators prefer the Sethite view. Sons of God refers to the righteous lineage of Adam's son Seth. Daughters of man refers to women from the ungodly lineage of Cain. I see. Under this view, Genesis 6:1-4 isn't describing spirit-human hybridity, but rather godly men compromising their faith by marrying ungodly women, leading to the spiritual corruption of the human race. I don't take that, or I don't accept that view, I guess I'll say, only because I don't remember reading that God set out to punish Cain's entire bloodline, just Cain himself. But maybe I'm wrong. Is it true that the Bible doesn't make any explicit mention that God condemned or cursed Cain's entire bloodline? So why would Cain's entire lineage be considered godless? And we know that God even, he let Cain live, so it's not like he hated Cain after the fact. He punished him, but he didn't completely abandon him. Yes, it is entirely true that the Bible does not explicitly state God cursed or condemned Cain's entire bloodline. When God passed judgment on Cain for murdering Abel, the curse was pronounced specifically upon Cain himself. The text nowhere mentions this judicial curse being biologically inherited by his children or future generations. So why is Cain's lineage considered ungodly? The idea that Cain's lineage was spiritually corrupt or ungodly does not stem from a formal curse passed down from God, but rather from literary presentation, behavioral patterns, and theological tradition. The author of Genesis structures chapter 4 and 5 to create a stark contrast between Cain's line and Seth's line. Oh, okay, we did read this. Okay, so in Genesis 4, Cain's lineage, Cain leaves God's presence. His genealogy focuses on human self-reliance, urbanization, and rapid moral decline. The climax of Cain's line is his descendant Lamech, who brags about committing murder and boasts that while Cain was to be avenged sevenfold, Lamech will avenge himself 77-fold. Okay. Seth's lineage. Seth is given to Adam and Eve as a replacement for Abel. Immediately upon Seth fathering Enosh, Genesis explicitly notes, at that time people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Oh, okay, I missed that. This genealogy includes righteous figures like Enoch, who walked with God and was taken to heaven, and Noah. Okay. All right. The term ungodly line of Cain was popularized primarily by early church fathers such as St. Augustine and Julius Africanus to support the Sethite view of Genesis 6. To avoid the idea that angels mated with human women, these theologians posited that the sons of God were the godly descendants of Seth, and the daughters of man were women from Cain's line who led the Sethites into spiritual compromise. Okay. Modern biblical criticism of the view. Many modern scholars point out the exact nuance that you noticed. The text doesn't label Cain's line as strictly ungodly. Genesis 6:1 refers to the daughters of mankind, Adam, not the daughters of Cain. That's a good point. I can't take credit for that. No explicit blanket condemnation. The Bible records technological and artistic achievements in Cain's line without issuing a declaration that every child born to Cain's family was inherently evil. Okay. All right. Genesis 6, verse 5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth. Oh, that's interesting. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is really interesting because obviously we haven't read the whole of the New Testament, the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, we don't hear any sort of, there's no characterization like this of God at all, having made a mistake. Although that's not what it says. It doesn't say he made a mistake, but for God to regret something that he did. So this is really interesting. So, okay, hold on. How do theologians break down this passage? This seems to be the only part in the Bible where God expresses regret or even explicitly says that he's sorry about something that he chose to do. And what does it tell us? The verse you referenced is one of the most intensely debated passages in biblical theology because it appears to present a paradox. How can an all-knowing, omniscient, unchanging, immutable, and sovereign God experience regret or sorrow over an action he performed? While Genesis 6:6 is a famous example, similar language appears elsewhere in Scripture. For example, 1 Samuel 15:11, where God says, I regret that I have made Saul king. Oh, that's interesting. Theologians throughout history have categorized and resolved this tension through four primary frameworks. First is the classical Reformed view, anthropomorphism, and relational change. Classical theologians argue that God is immutable, meaning unchanging in his nature, character, and ultimate decree, and impassible, meaning not subject to emotional shifts caused by created things. Therefore, they interpret language like regretted or grieved as an anthropomorphism, describing God's divine nature using human emotional concepts so that human minds can understand it. And that's likely. Let's see what else they have. Hebrew context. The key Hebrew word translated as regretted or repented is naham, which conveys deep sorrow, heavy breathing, or a turn in direction. The explanation, Calvin argued that God speaks in baby talk. That's a funny thing to say. That God speaks in baby talk, accommodatio, to, what a funny word, accommodatio, to accommodate our limited understanding because we're so simple-minded. Also quite likely, God speaks in baby talk so we can understand. That's funny. God does not change his eternal decree. Rather, when man changes from obedience / creation to total corruption, God's relation to man changes from blessing to judgment. Okay. I guess it could also be an expression like if we have to liken it to human terms, when we regret that we have to do something that we don't want to do, like punish your child or spank your dog or, but it's still based in love. Scriptural cross-reference. Classical theologians contrast Genesis 6:6 with Numbers 23:19. God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. And 1 Samuel 15, that's kind of badass. God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. And 1 Samuel 15:29, to show that God's internal decree does not change, even when his outward stance toward humanity shifts in response to sin. I guess that's the key there, in response to sin. Number 2, the covenant. This is a different lens by which to explain Genesis 6:6. The covenant relational view, genuine divine grief. This perspective accepts the classical view of God's sovereignty, but pushes back against the idea that God's grief is merely a figure of speech. They emphasize that biblical covenant theology presents God as deeply involved in history, capable of feeling real sorrow. The explanation, God's regret, is not an admission of a mistake, failure of foresight, or a change in his ultimate plan. Rather, it is the holy grief of a loving father. An analogy, a parent, well, that's okay, we don't need the analogy. Number 3, open theism, real possibility and dynamic response. Open theists interpret the passage literally regarding time and knowledge. They argue that God grants human genuine libertarian free will, meaning the future contains open possibilities rather than exhaustively predetermined events. That's really interesting because, it's true. So almost like by his own power, he allows free will to exist such that love can exist. It's really complex. The explanation, God knew that human corruption was possible, and he allowed humanity freedom. When humans chose total violence and wickedness, God experienced real disappointment and made a dynamic real-time decision to pivot his approach by initiating the flood and starting anew through Noah. Fascinating stuff. Okay. Verse 9, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined... Okay, so actually, before we read that, I just want to go back, because now this is bothering me. Oh, it was just right here. When God said his days shall be 120 years. And maybe I'm misunderstanding, but if God's decree that man would only live 120 years was not related to the wickedness that was on the earth at that time, why is it placed right in the middle of the talk about the Nephilim in Genesis? It seems to be just kind of thrown in there. So it says, when man began to multiply on the face of the land and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The placement of Genesis 6:3 is not accidental. It sits at the precise pivot point of the narrative, because it is God's direct judgment on the boundary crossing described in verses 1 through 2. Okay, so earlier the consensus was that it was not a punishment, and now it is, and that seems to make more sense to me, especially given the immediate context that we read it in Genesis. Okay, so let's read this. The placement of Genesis 6:3 is not accidental. It sits at the precise pivot point of the narrative, because it is God's direct judgment on the boundary crossing described in verses 1 through 2. Far from being thrown in, verse 3 provides the divine verdict on the corruption taking place before describing its famous offspring, the Nephilim, in verse 4. Okay. Oh, that's an interesting take. Okay, so here God reasserts the fundamental boundary, a cap on ambition. Right as beings are attempting to merge divine and human attributes to achieve unnatural longevity or hybrid power, God imposes a strict limitation to keep humanity grounded in mortality. Okay. All right, well, that's interesting. Okay, so that's let's go back. Back to verse 13, or verse 12. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits. Its breadth, 50 cubits. And its height, 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark, and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which is the breath. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing of the ground, according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come in to you to keep them alive. And take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. All right. Now we're on Genesis 7, so that's a good stopping point. So we'll stop there for tonight. We'll pick it up tomorrow on Genesis 7, verse 1. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to drop a sub. God bless you guys, and good night.